Morning, Chairman Anderson, members of the committee. My name is Nicole Renscher. I'm a fiscal analyst with Legislative Research. I'm also the KLRD facilitator for the committee this session, so you'll be seeing me quite a bit. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. I do have the Executive Director, Mike Brown, with me, who will come up and go over his testimony and answer any questions once I'm done. The budget summary looks a little different this year, and I know some people might not have seen it before, so while I'm going through KC Post's budget, I was also going to go, excuse me, sorry, kind of going to go over what some of the things are in the budget summary. So page 1, we have the executive summary with the background information on the agency, just what they do, sometimes like where they get money from, that type of stuff. And then we also have a table with expenditures by fiscal year and version. So we have the 24-25 actuals with the 26 approved and the 26 agency and 27 agency. And then this pie chart kind of just shows the agency request as a percentage of statewide total to help put everything into perspective. So at KC Post, you'll see they don't have any SGF, so they are 0%. And for all funds, they are less than 1% of the total statewide budget. On page 2, in other documents, this would be like a policy budget snapshot where it would kind of show the major adjustments. So if there were supplemental and enhancement requests, because there are no supplementals or enhancements for a KC Post and there are no major adjustments, they do not have that page. So page 2 is the summary of expenditures, which would be page 3 for other budget summaries. So we have the summary of expenditures. We have the, starting off quite broad with the 10-year expenditure history. Again, KC Post has no SGF, so that line stays flat. And then you can see just like a slight increase as we go along the 10 years. And then we also have that 10 years as a chart to show the funds with the percentage changes and the CPIU changes. And then you can see at the bottom, 5-year change, 10-year change, and then the 3-year average. Pages 3 through 5 start to get into a bit more detail. So these are going to have, expenditures by major purchase on the graph. And so state operations is a majority of KC Post with some slight state aid. And then they don't have any capital budget and debts. So that's 0 as well as other assistance. Expenditures by category, that kind of breaks down some of those major purposes that you see up above. So state operations breaks it down to, salaries and wages. State aids and assistance is aid to locals, capital budget, that type of stuff, as well as reappropriations on the bottom there. Page 4, we have a little bit going a little bit deeper, expenditures by classification. So salaries, not just salaries and wages, but now what's employee pay, what's the employee benefits. Again, breaking down some of those contractual services and the commodities. And then page 5, again, goes into state aid. And then there's also an expenditures by program page, which with KC Post, there's only 2 programs. Essentially only 1 because they don't have any funds. There's no expenditures in the IT infrastructure program. And then once we get page 6 gives us an expenditure by fund. So this is where you can see all the different funds that the agency has. Because this is a small agency, you'll see them all. I believe for larger agencies, they might be more grouped up by federal funds, special revenue funds, that type of thing. It depends on the analyst and the agency. And then there will typically be a fund analysis for fee-funded agencies. That'll be a fee fund analysis. KC Post isn't quite, it's not quite a fee fund. So it's not called a fee fund analysis. But as you see, though, there's 2 funds for KC Post. There's the Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training Fund, as well as the Local Law Enforcement Training Reimbursement Fund. I've chosen to show the Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Trainings because the local law enforcement training reimbursement fund is just a pass-through fund. So it's very similar to the Kansas Commission in that they get their revenue from the 2250 assessed on each municipal court case, but they get $1 of that for the local law enforcement training reimbursement, and the KC post fund gets $5 from that 2250. So you can see that's where most of their revenue comes from, is those docket fees. And then it shows most of the expenditures are going to be from this fund. Aid to locals, the state aid is going to be where the local law enforcement training reimbursement fund goes to. So when you turn to page 7, that's when we start getting into the fiscal year analysis. So for KC Post, you can see their 2025 approved was 1.2 million. They have no reappropriations, no supplemental requests, so those are all zero. And then we have our agency changes. So these are the changes to the approved. So going down from the table, you can see the approved budget, the 25. It kind of shows some of the major additions that were done or major changes that were done during the 25 session. So for KC Post, an investigator position was added. So the legislature approved increasing funding by 103,000 and adding 1 FTE position for an additional full-time investigator. And then there was also the pay plan, which you'll see in a lot of other agencies. For KC Post, it was 21,000. So that's all part of the 25 approved number. Now with the agency changes, we have salaries and wages. So the agency's revised estimate includes a decrease of 20,000, all from the KC Post fund, for a total of 780,000 for salaries and wages. This decrease is largely due to the salaries and wages savings from the new investigator position not being filled until late July. And then we have the aid to locals, like I was saying, with the reimbursement training reimbursement fund. There was an increase of 3,000. That's due to the reimbursements being higher than anticipated. Again, that's a pass-through fund. They are not able to touch those funds. It just goes through the agency. And then turning to the next page, fiscal year 27. Again, the approved number without reappropriations. There were no reappropriations originally, so that number is what you saw in 26. It's 1.2. No enhancement requests. Similar changes to what we had in 26. Agency requests a decrease of 15,000 all from KC Post Fund because it's to better match the fiscal year 26 salaries and wages expenditures. And then the aid to locals, they're also seeing that increase of 13,000. And then there was also an increase of 11,000 in all other categories. For like a total increase of 9,000. Are there any questions about KC Post or the budget summary in general?
Any questions for Nicole on FY 26 or 27? Okay, I think we'll go to the executive director. Thank you, Nicole. Welcome to committee, Mike.
Thank you, sir. Chair Anderson, committee members, appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. I believe you have my written testimony, so I won't belabor what was in there other than just to kind of summarize real quick. I addressed 3 different areas. The first area was staffing. We did add a full-time investigator position that was approved last session. They just came on board this month. With that, we'll be able to reduce the caseload and the time it takes to get these cases in front of the commission, but our cases aren't slowing down any. So we anticipate as we get this investigator in and spun up and ready to go, we'll see some benefit from that. But as things continue to increase, we anticipate needing additional staff at some point in the future. The second area, just different budget saving measures that have been taken over the years. My predecessor, Doug Schrader, had implemented several that are listed in there. The ones that I'm focusing on now, we just completed our move from our facility on North Amadon in Wichita to be co-located with KHP Troop F in Keachai. That's going to save about 12 grand a year in lease payments. And then additionally, those lease payments are now going to another state agency as opposed to a private individual. So it's helped supplement another state agency in revenue. The budget saving and time savings that I am focusing on are technology upgrades. The technology that we use at CPOS, we have 3 core applications that we use. The central registry is used by almost 9,000 certified officers and over 400 agencies to enter training data as well as go in and review their own data. In-house, we use that to track everything related to a certified officer from the time they become an officer till the time they leave service, employment history, demographics, different things like that. That platform is approaching 10 years old. It has not been significantly updated in that 10 years, and there are a lot of shortfalls that are creating a time suck for staff when it comes to routine tasks that we have to do every day. So that is one thing that we're going to try to focus on. It's going to be a very large project. We're still kind of trying to get our head wrapped around how large it will be. The second one is our website. Previous to December 25, CPOS had a full-time IT person on staff, and they took care of managing that website and everything that goes along with it, with SSL certificates and MX records and all this other stuff. When that person retired, those duties were transferred over to an existing staff member who is not an IT professional. So we don't have the expertise in-house to continue to do that. So we're looking at outsourcing that, which again will save an inordinate amount of time for that staff member trying to work their way through a realm that they're not familiar with. It's very difficult. I spent the last 12 years before I took this position in the IT world, and I have a hard time figuring that stuff out as well. The third one is our records management software. What we have currently is it's working, but it's not incredibly efficient. We have to store case files, so to speak, so we have hard files. We have stuff in that records management software, and then we also have stuff in SharePoint. When we get ready to present a case to the commission, we've got to consolidate all that information to present to them basically a summary of what that investigation is comprised of. And that takes an inordinate amount of time to do that because it's scattered across 3 different platforms. It's also very difficult to pull statistics out of the current system. So we're looking at a way to better that. Those first 2 points obviously cost money, which leads me to the third point in my written testimony is our fee-funded budget. Those funds from those docket fees have been on a steady decline for the last several years. We had a slight uptick in 2025 of about $65,000. But we don't have enough data to know whether or not that's a trend or just an anomaly. DOB is projecting, if things continue the way they are right now, within the first couple months of FY28, we won't have a budget because our expenditures are going to outrun the fee funds. So we are in desperate need of trying to find a solution to that. In my written testimony, there's several different options that we have come up with. I'm still working with the commission as a whole to get some guidance from them as to what they think might be the best avenue to try to approach this, as well as taking any feedback from you all or any legislature on potential options. Probably the easiest one would just be increase the docket fee that's out there now in statute. And there's some estimates in there of what different increases would realize for our budget. There's some other options in there, but again, that first option I think would be the easiest and the cleanest. That's kind of a summary. I'll be happy to stand for any questions if anybody has any.
Representative Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we look into how long the docket fee has been $22.50?
We will get that information. Um, It's good to hear that you had, you'd moved the headquarters from Amadon to Keach. I know, speaking with the past executive director, that was big for security for your folks. And so I assume you guys are happy with this.
Very, very happy. It's a much better facility when it comes to security. Where we were at on North Amadon, it was just a public office building. So when you came up off the elevator on the third floor, as soon as you got off the elevator, you could walk right into the office. We had no locked doors, no security, just because of the physical layout of that particular office building. Where we're at now with Troop F, KBI had previously occupied that space. So you come in the main doors to Troop F facility, and we have a key card door. In between that key card door, there are 2 interview rooms and then another key card door. So as we bring people in for interviews, they're in a man trap basically, which is much more secure, much better facility. And we're co-located with another law enforcement agency, which is always good.
Very good. Any further questions? Representative Howe.
Thank you, Chair. I am not, I apologize if I missed it, but I am not seeing any graphs or data that go along with the fee-funded budget shortfall in what we have provided. I would be interested in seeing more information about that. If that's something that we could see in the future, that would be wonderful. And just so we could have a better understanding of that. Just because I know when we look at the 10-year expenditure history, it looks like it's kind of leveled off recently, but, which I realize that's expenditures, but so just being able to compare that and see what's going on there. But just learning more about that, I would be interested in knowing that. Thank you.
And if you want, I don't have a chart that I can give you, but I can kind of give you some historical numbers on the fee fund. So in 2019, the total that came in off of those docket fees was a little over $800,000. FY20 was 778. 21 was 696. 22 was 653. 23 was 687. 24 was 620. Last year was 685. This year, we're tracking about 15% below what we were last year at this time.
Representative Resman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you have any idea on number of cases that your agency investigates every year?
Yeah, I can find those numbers for you. So looking at last year, FY25, we fielded 125 citizen complaints. We presented 167 cases to our Commission Investigative Committee. We took 82 certification actions, looked into 9 bias-based policing complaints from the AG's office, and then we had 4 administrative hearings last year. Right now, prior to adding this new investigator, we had 1 full-time and 2 part-time investigators, and they each carried a caseload of about anywhere from 65 to 70, sometimes 80 cases each at any given time that we're trying to cycle through and get through that process of getting them presented to the CIC.
And do you see the trend in complaints going down or going up or anything?
It's been pretty steady over the last several years. And looking at, let me look here. 2024 was 157, 2025 was 125. Those are just citizen complaints. We also, the majority of the investigations that we do come from what we call a termination or separation form. So when an officer is either terminated or leaves an agency, that agency is required to submit a form to us letting us know why that officer is leaving, whether it's a voluntary resignation, a resignation under questionable circumstances, or a termination. If it's under questionable circumstances or a termination, then we typically will initiate an investigation or at least a phone call to the agency to determine if the reason why they resigned under questionable circumstances or were terminated was a violation or could be a violation of the Training Act. Those demographic forms and those termination status change forms we get regular. I mean, probably on average 5 to 7 a week.
And I happen to notice that in 2025, they passed Senate Bill 125 that allowed you to hire an investigator and increase your pay. But we didn't increase the docket fees in order to help cover the expenses of those two things. So sometime down the road, we're going to have to do something with docket fees in order to cover your expenses, additional expenses now.
We're going to have to come up with some solution to remedy that shortfall, yes. The docket fee is already there per statute. Increasing that, to me, would be the cleanest and easiest way of doing that. There are other options out there, I'm sure, that, we could explore as well.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hoy asked about the 2250 docket fee in KSA 12-4117. There was a bill passed in 2016 that raised that docket fee from $20 to $22.50. And in that statute, it divides that $22.50 among many different funds. In that same bill, it raised the credit to the Kansas Commission on Peace Officers Standards and Training Fund from $250 to $5 in that same bill. So that was 2016.
Thank you. Any further questions for the director? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that will close our budget hearing on Kansas Commission of Peace Officers. And we will move to the State Board of Technical Professions. And we'll go to Joe Adams, Legislative Fellow.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. It is nice to meet everybody. As mentioned, I am Joe Adams, the new Legislative Fellow. In attendance today is also Brad Parker, the new Executive Director for the Board of Technical Professions. To be clear, the Board of Technical Professions is the consolidation of the Engineering Examiners Registration Board, the Architects Registration Board, the Landscape Architects Registration Board, and the Geology Board added in the year 2000. The Board of Technical Professions maintains and establishes a high standard of integrity, skill, and practice in technical professions to safeguard the line, health, prosperity, and welfare of the public. Effectively, they're an administrative regulatory agency for landscaping, geology, land surveying, and architecture. They accomplish this through the mandating of examinations, registrations, and ongoing oversight of licensees. And you should have this document in front of you. This is the budget summary I'm going to present today. As you'll note on the very first page, they have 0 SGF. They are fee funded in their entirety. On the first page, you can see their numbers compared to the rest of the Kansas state government. For SGF, again, that number remains 0, and across all funds, they are requesting $870,715, which is less than 1% of the total amount of all funds. Turning to page 2, you'll see that for fiscal year 2026, they are remaining at the budget level previously approved by Senate Bill 125. In fiscal year 2027, they are requesting an additional FTE, as well as furnishings and equipment to cover a new FTE, which we'll talk more in depth about later. Turning to page 3, you'll see a breakdown of their expenditures over the last 10 years. These include the last actuals from 2018 until 2025, and then the agency's request for 2026 and 2027. Notably, the jump from 2026 to 2027 is because of the requested FTE amount. Removing that amount would return it to the levels appropriated by the legislature in 2025. Turning to page 4, you will see the state operations broken down by their expenditure category. You'll note that 100% of all funds are used specifically for state operations. On top of that, again, to note, the salaries and wages tab, if you go to fiscal year 2027 under the agency, jumps from about 455, where it's remained steady, to 531,000. This is again represented by the FTE request. Past that, you'll notice that for contractual services, there's a jump in the years 2025 to 2026. This will be talked more in depth about later, but the agency has been contracting for front-end office help to have a temporary FTE effectively, and this contractual services is budgeted in that way. So that is why there's a jump of about 30,000. Again, this will be covered more in depth once we get to the fiscal year analysis later into the document. Moving from there to page 5, this breaks down the expenditures more in depth by category. I'm going to bring a few to your attention. First, under fees professional, you'll note, this is under the contractual services category with fees professional. Under the years 2026 approved at 58,500. The next line is 96,432. This is representative of the agency using that money and funds to hire a contractual employee for a period of time. The next one is, you'll note underneath the fees professional under other services, the approved number is 126,500. The agency has requested 145,809. This jump this is related to office space requested by the agency. Actually, that's rents and leases, which is further down, which jumps from 68,200 approved by the legislature to 75,553. But these two numbers are, the fees of professional and other services are meant to represent the increase of Attorney General office costs, as well as the numbers that they're using to contract an additional employee to manage front office related activities. Turning from there to page 6. We're going to go to expenditures by fund. Again, there is no SGF funding required by this agency. All of it comes from the technical professional fee fund, or 100%. We have a breakdown of the fee fund that is associated with this agency. You'll note that there's a number of encumbrances under that for the fiscal year 2024 actual of $85,640. The agency indicated that $71,643.71 of this is because the accounting system closed in the state of Kansas in fiscal year 2024. However, money continued to come in, equaling to that amount. And then fiscal year 2025, when the accounting system started again, once more $14,000 was added on top, which leads to this $85,000 number. Effectively, there's a gap in time where the accounting system is not counting, however, money still comes in, and it's counted as an encumbrance. So that money is still just added to the agency. It's just counted outside of the year, which is why it's labeled that way. Ultimately, it's not anything. That is what that is. Past that, on this page, it tells you how much they're receiving in licenses and personal services through the years, the amount available to the agency each year. The ending balance remains steady at about $3,500,000. The agency does deposit 10% of their funds that they receive into the SGF budget each year. There's also, of course, a breakdown of their expenditures that they required or have asked for and received in the past 2 years, as well as what they're requesting for 2026 and 2027. Turning to page 7, excuse me, you can see a breakdown of the fees that they have currently. No fees have been changed within the last 2 years, which is why the previous fees remain at a 0. The current fee that is currently charged, as well as statutory fee, is provided to you. And after that, we move to the fiscal year 2026 analysis on page 8. I'm going to go by line item. Number 1 is the amount that was approved in the 2025 budget of last year. A total of $870,715 was approved for the technical professions, and the agency remains at this number for the year 2026 as their request. As I've mentioned before, if you look at line item 2 under contractual services, the agency reallocated about $40,000 from their salary and wages expenditure category to contractual services. During previous fiscal years, the previous executive director utilized a contracted employee to support front office operations, which is effectively where all those funds are being used, which is why in the actual graph itself, you'll see an increase of $22,000 with an exact demonstrable decrease of $22,000 from the other expenditure categories, more specifically salaries and wages. On top of that, under line item 3 for all other adjustments, you can see that the agency reduced their amount by 22,000. However, this is a balancing of their budget because rent costs did rise due to higher state leases. There was additional funding requested for the LSOB storage. The agency does plan to convert some of their storage space to office space for the proposed fiscal year 2027 FTE. Attorney fees did increase because of the Attorney General's office. Software licenses and data subscriptions also reflected routine cost adjustments, and these increases were offset as the agency shifted to email platforms like SharePoint. Spending on professional fees, dues, and subscriptions were reduced to meet actual needs, and office equipment and computer hardware costs were cut by around $9,000 combined. If you'd like, I can move right to fiscal year 2027. We can stay here.
Let's go to 2027.
Yeah. In 2027, this is when the agency has made a request, so we do have an enhancement request. Starting with line item 1, again, the 2025 Senate budget, the approved amount for the agency is $875,120. They have requested an assistant executive director position. This request includes an $86,000 increase, all from the technical profession fee fund, as well as one full-time FTE to reestablish the assistant director role. Historically, the agency has maintained about 6 established positions in its organizational structure. This includes an executive director, the assistant executive director, an office manager, a licensing administrator, a licensing technician, and administrative assistant. But they've only been employed, or they've only have statutory limits for 5 full-time positions. As a result, 1 position has remained unfilled at any given time in the last decade. In the past decade, the assistant executive director role or the administrative assistant position has typically been the unfilled position. From July 2024 to April of 2025, the agency did fill the administrative assistant role with a contracted employee to maintain operations within their authorized 5 FTE limit. In May 2025, the agency then converted that contracted role into a full-time position, resulting in a brief period where 6 staff members were on payroll, while the outgoing and incoming executive director had an overlapping during a planned leadership transition. Following the former director's retirement in July 2025, staffing returned to 5 FTEs, and now the agency is effectively asking to make the assistant executive director position permanent while being able to maintain their front office position. Moving to line item 2, they are requesting an amount of $3,000, which is to help furnish the position that they are requesting. The agency indicated to me that this would be contingent on the previous request being accepted. So if the FTE is denied, this should also be denied. And the fourth line item is the legislative pay plan that was given in 2025. As this agency is a biennial, their budget is approved 2 years out at a time. And in 2025, the amount that should have been approved for the legislative pay plan in 2027 was omitted by accident. So you will see a lot of these pay plan requests come through. Past that, in other changes, this is some more of the balancing that was noted before. The agency still has reallocated approximately $40,000 from salaries and wages to contractual services to pay for the front office staff, as previously noted. These are now covered by a full-time employee, and the agency has indicated that they plan to return these funds to salaries and wages to maintain the ongoing support for the position moving forward. Past that, on to line item 6, the agency has expected moderate increases in several categories. These include rent, for higher lease rates for state office-owned buildings and a planned request for additional storage in the LSOB. Attorney fees were also projected to increase, and incremental adjustments are anticipated for software licenses and data subscriptions, reflecting pretty routine cost adjustments. These increases were offset by anticipated reductions in several areas, including intergovernmental postage costs will continue to fall as the agency uses online opportunities like email and SharePoint. Spending on professional fees and dues and memberships and subscriptions have also moved to decrease to match recent activity, and the agency was able to lower office equipment and computer hardware estimates by about $10,000. With that, I am prepared to answer any questions.
Thank you, Joe. I have a quick question on, if I can find it here. Page 5. So on the fees professional, they kind of bounce around there. I know you touched on it, but in the 25 actuals, 83,000, then 26 approved drops, and then it kind of bounces back up on 26 and 27 agency. So will these fees drop back down if they get that additional FTE? So
to be clear, on this section, the approved amount by the legislature is $58,000. My understanding for fees professional is what they use for the Attorney General's office. It's the one beneath that. I misspoke earlier for fees other service that they have been transitioning that money for the FTE. That question might also be better answered by the agency themselves, but to the fees professional, my understanding is that is actually for the Attorney General's office, and earlier I had misspoke when I started with that one, when I'm supposed to talk about the second one.
No problem. Any further questions for Joe? All righty, thank you so much. We will move to Executive Director Brad Parker.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Brad Parker, Executive Director of the Board of Technical Professions. The board's mission is to ensure the health, safety, property, and welfare of Kansans by regulating the professional practice of architecture, engineering, geology, landscape architecture, and land surveying. The board accomplishes its mission by ensuring that these professional activities are carried out only by individuals who meet the qualifications prescribed by state statute and the board's regulations. The agency is governed by a board of 11 members who are licensed in one or more of the professions and 2 public members. The board has submitted written testimony that respectfully asks the legislature to authorize using technical professions fee funds for the Assistant Executive Director position within our agency for fiscal year 2027. KSA 74-7008 authorizes the board to appoint an Executive Director and Assistant Executive Director. We do acknowledge that over the last 10 years, my predecessors have chosen to keep that position filled only about half the time. Yet we believe current circumstances warrant having an Assistant Executive Director, and that has been the agency's goal since December 2023. The volume of licensing and continuing education work in the board office over the past 10 years has increased about 20% as more technical professionals, many based in other states, seek to offer their services in Kansas. Over the same time, the number of enforcement cases has remained relatively stable, yet they've become increasingly complex. That is due in part to the gig economy, new technologies like generative artificial intelligence, and the snowball effect created when interstate licensees are disciplined in multiple jurisdictions based on the same infraction or failure to report the infraction to all the jurisdictions in which that professional is licensed. Combined, those factors make it challenging for the current staff to complete all the agency's processes and performance objectives within desired turnaround times. If those turnaround times could be achieved consistently and the office's workload continues to increase at the recent pace, our agency likely would begin maximizing its annual contribution to the state general fund in the next couple of years. Additionally, 4 years ago, the board set goals to increase its participation with the National Professional Licensure Examination Councils with which it works, and to enhance outreach to the technical professional societies and associations in Kansas. The board maintains that filling the Assistant Executive Director position would allow licensing and administrative personnel to focus more on their core functions, as the AED would be the agency's enforcement and continuing education specialist. And I have gathered that most state boards and commissions have an enforcement specialist. The AED also would staff the board's complaint committee, be the primary liaison with disciplinary counsel, and support the board's national participation and in-state outreach. Our board thanks the committee for this opportunity to state its justifications for using technical professions fee funds for the vacant yet statutorily authorized 1.0 FTE Assistant Executive Director position beginning in fiscal year 2027. And I'm happy to stand for questions.
Any questions for the director? All right. Thank you very much, Director. You got off easy. All right, we will close the budget hearing on State Board of Technical Professions, and we will open the budget hearing on the State 911 Board. We'll move to Kyle Anderson.
Good morning, everybody. I am Kyle Anderson, a fiscal analyst with the KLRD, and we are going to start off this morning with the State 911 Board. The State 911 Board is a newly coordinated agency within the state, just converting at the end of the last fiscal year, and they oversee all of the 911 services and educational and compliance related issues with that. And before I completely disregard it, Executive Director Massey is also in the audience behind me. So if you have questions that I cannot answer, she may also be able to help you. The agency is primarily funded by fees from the phone line subscriber fee, 99-cent fee, and that is split up between the three funding accounts for the agency. A additional revenue stream comes from a percentage levy on wireless, prepaid wireless lines that do not pay the wired line fee. Moving on to page 2, this page will provide you a history snapshot of the agency, but because the agency just became an agency, the snapshot really only provides the current year and projected budget year. To provide you a little bit more context, the historic spending level of the agency has remained fairly constant. There has not been any major upticks or upheavals in the historic expenditures, so the trend line would be relatively flat. Carrying on to page 3, as with the previous page, the graph and table are going to be a little bit empty because there is not data prior to this year, but for all intents and purposes, the really only major effect here is that the agency's 26 request reduces the amount from the approved slightly, and then in 2027 the state operations budget will increase slightly. Carrying over to page 4, this table will break down the actual independent expenditures within the state operations. You can see that primarily the fees go out for things related to communication and renting and leases. This is attributable to the fact that they're a communications-based organization and have lease spaces for the different call centers throughout the state. Carrying on to page 5, this is a breakdown of the actual fee fund for the agency. As I mentioned on the first page, the call lines throughout the state have a 90% or a 90-cent surcharge on them and a 2.06% fee on prepaid wireless. 23 cents of that 90 cents goes to the 911 operations fund as presented here, and that is primarily utilized for paying the rental fees and the salaries and wages and host solution costs for the agency. It also affects a revenue stream from a surcharge to each of the call centers of $18,000 per call line. Ultimately, they have a slightly decreasing balance from 26 to 27, but without further trend data, I don't know that there's sufficient information to make any conclusions from that at this point. Carrying on to page 6, we begin the fiscal year 26 analysis. As I noted on the 10-year trend, the only real change for the 26 budget is a reduction of $22,806. And this is associated with an overestimation in the salaries and wages for onboarding a new employee. They did not know all of the different benefit selections that the employee would take, so budgeted for potentially taking the highest amount of those. And when these selections were not the highest level, we are lapsing the amount that is the difference between those. And some relatively big ticket things that were added in SB 125 for fiscal year 2026 that may be of value is the critical facility mapping grant for $2 million that was added for mapping different K through 12 schools across the state. If we move then to page 7 on fiscal year 2027, the first line item there will be the backing out of the $2 million for the facility mapping grant, since the numbers that the table are based on start from the 2026 agency numbers, the approved numbers. The mapping grant is baked into that 26 number, and for the base of 27 has to be pulled out. So that is item number 1. And the second part of that, for the $900 in commodities, they were outfitting a mobile call center and anticipated up to $900 in parts being needed for this fiscal year. That ended up not being necessary because the project got finished before that, or will finish in fiscal year 2026, so not carry over into fiscal year 2027. Item number 2 is for contractual services, an increase of $1.5 million. And this is primarily for updating maps with new GIS data. Every 3 years, there's a process of re-imaging to update maps for any changes to keep the call center map data accurate and available. Item number 3 is a reduction of $12,571 in salaries and wages. As with fiscal year 2026, the benefits for the newly onboarded employee were not as high as previously budgeted for, so the reduction is a lapse associated with that. Any questions for fiscal year 26 and 27?
Any questions for Kyle or Representative Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you remind me, I want to say it was somewhere around 6 or 6.5 million to get all K-12 schools on the GIS critical infrastructure mapping?
I believe it is predicted to be about 6.5. I think there is an expectation of about 4.5 million to finish the other 1,000 or so schools.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions for Kyle? All right, thank you very much. We will move on to the Executive Director, Sherry Massey. Welcome to committee.
Good morning, everyone. You have the slides in front of you? Excellent. So just to give you kind of a basic description, the State 911 Board is responsible really for 3 areas. First, we are responsible for the collection, distribution, and auditing of the use of all 911 fees. Kyle explained those. It's a 90-cent fee on all phone lines, and then for any phone purchased at a retail establishment, like what we would commonly call a burner phone, somebody that is buying a card or buying a phone for temporary use, there's a 2.06% fee issued on that. The next thing we do is monitor 911 services. This is a 911 call and all of the paths that it takes from the customer that dials 911 until it gets to the 911 center. There's a lot of networking in the middle there. There's a lot of regulation from the FCC, a lot of rules in the state of Kansas, and certainly a lot of technology in the middle, and we monitor kind of how that whole thing works. Then the other thing that we do is attempt to find economies of scale and to implement technology that allows the 911 centers across the state to be able to have a greater level of capability without it having to be paid for 119 times. That's basically our primary effort there. If you take a look at page 3, you will see a list of kind of the updates of what our transition to a state agency have done. The State 911 Board has been around as the Kansas 911 Coordinating Council since 2012. But in July of 25, we became the State 911 Board. So the transition of taking all that stuff that was in private accounting and all that kind of thing and moving it into the state agency has been really what has been occupying us. So all of the staff, all of the vehicles, all of the contracts and things have been moved and have been put into the various state systems. Fee collection, the actual sending of the 911 fees in is still with a contractor, but they have begun transfers, daily transfers of those fees into the Treasury for us to handle as the agency. We handle fee distribution out to the 911 centers now. That used to be a contractor obligation. And actually, when I say we handle it, I mean our first one is January 15th. So we're a little bit nervous about that, but everybody has been very helpful. And I think we're going to be able to handle it pretty well. And really, that's it. The balance of funds, with the exception of a small amount that was left behind to handle any outstanding transactions, has been moved into the Treasury, and we are fully transitioned. So it's good news. Page 4 for you is just kind of an explanation of 911 fees. I know a lot of people are curious about them. So every 90 cents gets divided up according to that little pie chart that is on there. 66 cents of it goes out to PSAPs. 1 cent of it goes into a grant fund for emergency requests from PSAPs. PSAPs are public safety answering points. It's what we call 911 centers. And then 23 cents is used for board operations. I have listed out to the side for you the allowable uses of 911 fees statutorily, as well as those uses expressly forbidden. So in the middle there is a little bit of interpretation, and we have an expenditure review committee that looks at anything that doesn't obviously fall into one of those allowable or denied categories. So our budget has 3 funds. 2 of them are entirely for local aid. The state fund, which I'm sure you have in your documentation, is the biggest, and that is the 66 cents of the 911 fee that gets distributed out. The second one is the grant fund. That's where the 1 cent goes, and also where it is possible to move any excess funding that we do not spend from the operations fund over into to support 911 centers for any kind of emergency grants they need. But when it comes down to our day-to-day budget, that is the operations fund. It covers board administrative costs, the costs around 911 fee collection and distribution, as well as the shared next generation 911 infrastructure. And I wanted to give you guys an idea of where all of this kind of goes. So the hosted solution is the telephone system that is used by 109 911 centers across the state. The remaining ones are on the Mid-America Regional Council 911 system, so they're on that kind of separate system there. And every time I show this map, somebody asks me why we have an Oklahoma County, and that is because the 911 center in Coffeyville is contracted by Nowata County, Oklahoma, to take over their 911 services. This was vetted between the 2 attorneys general, and no Kansas 911 fees are used for the Nowata work. It's just they're on our system. The hosted solution includes a lot of different types of technology. It is not only the call routing I talked about, which is the network between the caller and the 911 center, but also the broadband connectivity to all of the 911 centers, the call handling software, that is sitting in there, as well as the hardware that it is used on, and all of the mapping data. So all of that is the hosted solution. When you see that in statute or in our budget, that is what is there. But if you will take a look at page number 9, you will see how the operations fund actually breaks down. So for us, we have always done our budget in what I will call common terms. So looking at the state budget for me doesn't very clearly tell the story of exactly how much money is spent for each type of thing, and so I thought this would be helpful for you. So $12.9 million of our budget request is for the hosted solution. It pays directly for all of the broadband, all of the hardware, all of the software in the 911 centers. When we have increases over time, for example, within this, within the hosted solution, if we have an increase in the needs of the broadband that the 911 centers have, that can ratchet up our contracts just a little bit. Now, we obviously keep control of these costs as well as we can, but the services do have to be maintained. So the GIS data will not usually be as high as it is this year. As Kyle mentioned, every 3 years, we fly the state to get aerial imagery statewide. That costs about $1.5 million. And so we only have that piece of our budget every 3 years, and you'll hear me talk about it again here, I guess, in 29. Year to year, the GIS program, which is critical and very well known within our state, costs us around $500,000 other than that imagery. Then we spend money, about $1.3 million, on PSAP support. This is everything from providing training to the 911 centers, providing information for them, advocacy for them, staff members that go out and assist them, either with training or with expertise, that kind of thing. It is for the admin day that we put on, where PSAP administrators can come in and learn about what things are going on, both with our system and within the state that matter to them. And then about $650,000 for the administrative expenses of the board and the staff, accounting, that kind of thing. So Kyle went over the changes for the budget, so I'll just kind of move on from that and give you guys a very quick update on the critical facility mapping grant. The $2 million that was allocated last year through the proviso has been very nearly fully expended. So there is a map on page 12 for you that shows specifically where grants have been awarded. 47 911 centers have been approved for grants covering 443 K through 12 institutions across the state. The little number on the map tells you how many schools in each of those areas are there. Please be aware these aren't counties, these are 911 center service areas. So like, for example, in Montgomery County, you're looking at a request from the Coffeyville 911 center. That's why it's only kind of part of the county there. So that represented every application that we had received as of December 11th, and just happened to very nearly, by estimation, top out the $2 million. So applications are still open. We are taking them, but we are not awarding anything further until full costs come in for the ones that have already been awarded, and we see if there's any funding left over, or of course, if there's any future funding. So that hits all of my topics, and I would stand for any questions you have.
All right, any questions for the director? Representative Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the information. I am curious on the GIS facility mapping. Were there schools that had applied that didn't get awarded based on the funding, or did everyone get theirs approved who applied?
Everyone who applied by December 11th was approved. That was when I made the second round of awards. We have had a few applications come in since then that are pending, and we will have quite a few more. There was some concern and hesitation on the part of some of the schools, and I think some of the 911 centers as well, is really trying to wrap their head around what ongoing costs might be associated with this, because of course the data, while incredibly valuable, also has a shelf life, and somebody needs to update it in the future. And deciding who was going to do that and how that might look, I think, kind of held us back a little bit on the number of applications that we received. But frankly, I think 443 is a pretty amazing number, especially in the short term that we had to bring it in. So I think once these schools start receiving maps, once those conversations start being had between schools and 911 centers, we're going to see another big flood of applications like we did in November.
And so my issue of only partially funding was that I think it's unfair that some schools have this and others don't. But does it seem like it's a valuable asset for public safety and helping to protect our kids?
Well, I would certainly say so. Now, obviously, we have not, all of this is in process at this point. No maps have been delivered. The procurement process did not finish up, and we were not able to do final award until the end of October. So what you're seeing now is just the interest from the end of October to December. So it's obviously a pretty big patch of people for that short period of time. I know there's a lot of increasing interest. We get more questions about it every day from those that didn't apply. And I certainly think a lot of jurisdictions are very excited to see what they get. We are hoping to get some good use case information directly from Kansas, but we already have contact with some other states where similar types of things have been done, or other types of mapping programs have gone on that we're trying to use to educate people with.
Thank you. And I hope we can figure out how to get this to benefit all Kansas schools. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I would agree with our ranking member and with you. It is quite amazing how many applications we got in such a short period of time, and hopefully we can work to get the whole state covered. Is there a reason that the other $2 million was not put in this next year's budget?
Well, yes, it is state general funds, and I was not comfortable asking for a $2 million request for it, since it came originally from a proviso and a legislative initiative. I just felt like that was the appropriate place to keep it.
Very good. Any further questions from the committee? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for your time.
All right. We will close the budget hearing on the State 911 Board, and we will open the budget hearing on the EMS Board. We will go to Kyle Anderson.
Good morning. I am Kyle Anderson, and now we're going to move gears to talking about the Emergency Medical Services Board. As with the State 911 Board, the Emergency Medical Services Board oversees the operation and compliance of the emergency medical services across the state and assists with things like education and various compliance and training associated items. As you can see, they are a fully fee-funded agency with 0% SGF. And if we then turn to page 2, this provides a snapshot of the 10-year history of the agency. And to begin with, I will point out that there is a fairly drastic rise from fiscal year 25 to 26 that you have probably noticed, and this is almost entirely attributable to the filling of 6 vacant positions they have been working to fill. And with the 6 positions now being filled, they have increased salaries and wages expenditures and the associated travel and contractual costs associated with those employees. But other than that, the dip in fiscal year 24 is largely associated with a decrease in the amount of state aid that is going out of the agency. And the underlying reason for the decrease in fiscal year 2024 that did not remain is there were a couple of extra funding sources that were available, including COVID ARPA funds and an additional federal funding source that was being utilized for aid purposes instead of the normal funding sources. In moving to page 3, the various independent contributions to the expenditures are mapped out, and you can see that the green line for the fiscal year 2024 has the slight dip associated with the COVID funds and Promise Act funds, and the remaining budgetary elements remain relatively constant until the 26 uptick for the additional 6 FTE positions that were filled. Moving to page 4, I'd like to point out first and foremost that the professional fees accounts for roughly 12% of the budget, and the agency utilizes this for all of their IT service related expenses and the legal services that they use for administrative hearings and lawsuits. And the next item down, the other fees, is their computer programming and banking transaction fees and recruitment training related expenses. Moving to page 5, the first table there is the state aid payments, and you may note that in accordance with the dip of state aid distribution for fiscal year 2024, that number is quite substantially lower than the rest of the numbers attributable to utilizing those other funds. Moving to page 6, the agency is broken into 3 sub programs that all integrate and coordinate to carry out the process. The 14 employees are equally divided across the 3, so they are the 3 programs. So the FTEs per program is fractional since 14 is not divisible by 3. And if we then carry on to page 7, this breaks down the operating fund, which is a fee fund that receives 0.25% of the fire insurance premiums, and that goes to licensing and certification related expenses for the agency. Carrying on to page 8, this begins our fiscal year 2026 analysis. And the agency has no reappropriations or supplemental requests for the year. The legislature last year increased the contractual services expenditures for the agency to account for cost indices increases. And there's a slightly decreasing offset in grant funds for funds that had been carried over from the previous year. Item number 2 is a revision to contractual services for an increase of $5,213. And this is a result of increasing costs to firewall maintenance and travel expenditures primarily. Item number 3 is a purchase of radio and computer equipment for an increase of $49,155. And that is associated with upgrading the radio system for the agency to meet statewide needs. Item number 4 is the patient care equipment grants, an increase of $49,052. And this is a carryover of judiciary awards from 2025. Item number 5 is office and data processing supplies, an increase of $6,616. And this is primarily for cost indices associated with the office supplies and some additional expenses due to the additional 6 FTE employees. usage of office supplies. And item number 7 is a decrease of $114,364 in salaries and wages. And this was lapsed due to the hiring of the 6 FTE positions not carrying through the full year. So the percentage of the fiscal year that they were still vacant is the accounting for the $114,000. Moving to page 10, for fiscal year 2027, there are, again, no enhancement requests. The first line item is for an increase of $85,821 in legal services. And this is budgeting for a worst-case scenario kind of practice where they are anticipating increasing legal costs because of the number of lawsuits that the agency has been involved in. And so they are pre-planning for that in the intent of potentially needing them. Item number 2 is office and computer equipment, an increase of $23,354. And this is predominantly associated with some changes to their IT management plan to cycle out computers every 2 years instead of every 3 years to limit the number of incidents that they're having for incurring IT or additional IT expenses. And lastly, item number 4 is salaries and wages, and this is a decrease of $102,807. As with the previous year, part of the fiscal year was vacant, and because the basis of the budget comparison is from the approved 2026 number, the same vacant fallout of monies occurs in the 27 budget accordingly. Any questions on 26 and 27?
Any questions for Kyle on 26 or 27? All right, thank you, Kyle. And it doesn't look like the executive director is here, so we will, okay, Representative Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming back up. I appreciate your presentation. What caught my eye, these grant funds that are continuing to carry over from previous years, do we know the balance of these funds? Because I don't think they're getting spent down.
Off the top of my head, I do not know the balance of those. I can check with the agency and see if they can get me some more data on those.
Yeah, I was going to ask that of Joe. So I know, from what I understand, there are pretty large amounts still in there. So just wanted to throw that out there. If we could get that number, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, thanks, Kyle. All right, that will close the budget hearing on EMS Board. And we will open the budget hearing on the Abstractors Board of Examiners, and we will move to Connor Hughes, Legislative Fellow.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Connor Hughes, KLRD Fellow, and today I will be highlighting the Abstractors Board of Examiners budget summary. The Abstractors Board of Examiners deals primarily in the regulation of individuals and firms that compile and sell abstracts of real estate within the state of Kansas. This includes compiling comprehensive files on ownership history, as well as records of sales and transactions relating to any given property in question. The board also serves as protection against fraudulent and improper land transfer titles within the state of Kansas. In the fiscal year 2025, the board issued 147 professional abstractor licenses to businesses in the state of Kansas, as well as 182 licenses to individual professional abstractors across the state. And underneath that executive summary on page 1, you'll see expenditures by fiscal year and version, as well as a table that is the agency request as a percentage of the statewide total for fiscal year 2026. The Abstractors Board of Examiners receives $0 of SGF money and it makes up less than 1% of all funds. Moving on to page 2, you will see a summary of expenditures over the last 10 years, as well as a dollar breakdown and change percentage for each year. You'll also see a 5-year change, a 10-year change, and 3-year average. On page 3, expenditures by major purpose are detailed on this line graph at the top, and underneath that, there is another specific breakdown for expenditures by category between the fiscal years 2024 and 2027. 100% of expenditures fall under the state operations category on that table. Moving on to page 4, there will be another table for expenditures by classification for state operations. You will notice that salaries and wages make up 83.3% of expenditures, with another 14% being covered by contractual services and just over 2% being covered by commodities. On page 5, you will see a breakdown of the fee fund. The abstractor's fee fund draws revenue solely from fees imposed on individuals and firms seeking licensing from the abstractor's Board of Examiners. The only source of funds for the agency is the abstractor's fee fund. Per KSA 75-3170A, 90% of incoming revenue is retained by the agency and 10% is remitted to or deposited in the state general fund up to a maximum of $100,000 per fiscal year per fund. Moving on to page 6, we will see the fiscal year 2026 analysis. The legislature passed and the governor enacted one bill appropriating and adjusting funding for state agencies. For the Abstractors Board of Examiners, this was $25,723, and there were no major changes to the Abstractors Board of Examiners approved budget for 2026. The revised estimate includes an increase of $1,100 for contractual services that is offset entirely by a decrease of about $1,200 from the abstractor's fee fund as well. This is primarily attributable to a decrease in computer programming costs for fiscal year 2026. And if there are any questions on the fiscal year 2026 analysis, I'd be happy to answer them, or I can move on.
Let's go through 27.
All right. If you'll turn to page 7, you'll see the fiscal year 2027 analysis. KSA 75-3717F requires select agencies of a primarily regulatory nature to submit a budget request for an additional fiscal year at the beginning of a biennium. The Abstractors Board of Examiners is one such biennial agency and has an approved budget for fiscal year 2027. That dollar amount is $25,723. There are, again, no changes to the overall agency request, but the agency's revised estimate does include an increase of about $1,100. Again, all from the abstractor's fee fund for contractual service fees. This is, again, completely offset by a decrease of just under $1,200, primarily attributable to a decrease in computer programming costs for fiscal year 2027. And this concludes my fiscal year 27 analysis, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
All right, thank you, Connor. Any questions for Connor? All right, I appreciate it. Thank you. Well, that will close the budget hearing on Abstractors Board of Examiners, and that will finish out our day ahead of schedule. Just looking at next week, tentatively, we're off Monday and Tuesday. We're going to work Wednesday and Thursday. We will hear 2 budgets on Wednesday, and we will work the 5 budgets we heard today on Thursday, potentially the 2 we hear next Wednesday as well. But plan on that. Doesn't sound like we'll be meeting Friday, but I'll email you if anything changes. And we'll see you next week.